That is the noise of the rain battering on the barn-like press centre. Lionel, we've got a bit of a problem.
We have. The thunder is rumbling, the lightning is flashing. I don't want to go outside.
Chucking it down in Chorges.
It is. I think they've already cancelled tomorrow's stage. If it carries on like this, no one will want to ride in the rain, will they?
Never mind.
Never mind what it's like.
Never mind tomorrow's descent. I'm not even sure if we can make it to the car.
No, and dinner stopped serving at 9. Don't forget, it's currently quarter past 7.
I don't know what we're going to do. Here's Tan Man, ready to pod. Well, we're just improvising at the moment because we don't know where to go, Tan Man. We need to go. I think we should head to the car.
No way.
The car. No, the car will be quiet, no?
The car is a 10-minute walk away.
No, it's not. The car's 2 minutes away.
We'll be soaked through by then.
Let's just do it in those little booths over there. Let's find a booth. Can you pause it?
I think that's a Portaloo, Tan Man.
No, I've been in there already for a few hours today. Had a nice session. Solid session.
Hello and welcome to the Tour de France podcast with humansinvent.com. My name is Richard Moore and tonight I'm with Lionel Burney.
Good evening, Richard.
And Tan Man.
Hello, Richard Moore. Hello, Lionel Burney.
And we're going to perhaps be joined by Owen Slot from the Times. Owen is just finishing his work and hopes to join us soon. So, guys, let's crack on. I mean, first of all, Lionel, you should explain where we are because that might offer an explanation for the soundtrack.
This is our most challenging podcast yet, isn't it? Because we're in a metallic barn in Chorges, and there is a torrential rainstorm going on outside. So everybody is in here sheltering from the rain, and the rain is drumming on the roof. So, yeah, apologies for the background noise, but there's pretty much nothing we can do about it. We just can't stop the rain, much as we'd like to.
Bit of atmosphere. It also sets up tomorrow nicely. I think we're going to talk about today's time trial and also probably equally tomorrow's stage, which is the one we've probably been looking forward to most since the tour route was announced.
Sorry, I disagree. I think the stage after tomorrow presents a better opportunity for the guys.
All right, Tan Man. All right. I mean, the two ascents of Alpe d'Huez it certainly captures the imagination, doesn't it? Or it captured mine. Anyway, we'll move on to that in a minute. Let's talk about today's time trial. Chris Froome won the stage, the third stage. I reckon he's got a reasonable chance now of becoming the first five-stage winner in yellow in Paris since Laurent Fignon in 1984. I'm not including Lance Armstrong, who did it in 2004 but had that annulled. So I think Laurent Fignon was the last rider to win the Tour and win 5 stages along the way. He's undefeated on the summit finishes so far. There are 2 more to come. However, it doesn't seem quite as simple. We know that he's the strongest rider in the race. He proved that again today. But Contador is ominous. I mean, he finished second today, 9 seconds down. I think that's the best he's looked so far in the Tour. He's promising to cause a bit of havoc in the descents tomorrow and the day after and the supposed day after. It doesn't seem quite as wrapped up as you think it might. I don't know if that's your feeling as well.
I was going to say, Chris Froome said in his press conference afterwards that he expected to lose, was it 30 seconds to a minute to Contador today? So actually,
well, he didn't say Contador. He said to his to whoever won the time trial.
Okay.
Which
you would have thought would have been Contador. So maybe he's looking at this as an extremely good day. It is an extremely good day for Chris Froome, surely. He
also said in the press conference that Michel Count, his fiancée, did not give him the moniker Froome Dog. It was his teammates. I wanted that.
That wasn't Monica Froome Dog. That's not his nickname. It's moniker, I think. Yeah, you were meaning that.
But anyway, I wanted
Monica.
That.
Hey, Monica.
I wanted that. Oh, yeah, the moniker is not Monica. It's Froome Dog.
Yeah.
But I wanted that clarified.
Well, you did ask the question, Taman, and it was an excellent question, and I'm sure it probably came as a bit of relief to him after some of the questions he's had. But he was asked a few kind of left field questions tonight in the press conference, actually. But I think how much can you say about mountain time trial? It proved that Froome is the strongest rider in the race. But as I say, I was impressed by Contador today.
Yeah, would you refer to this, though, as a mountain time trial or a mountainous time trial? Because a mountain time trial for me is one which finishes atop a mountain as opposed to a mountainous time trial, which, let's not get into semantics, but because there was 13.3 kilometres out of the 32 kilometres was uphill, so that was, I worked it out using my innate mathematical genius that it was 42%.
Today's time trial didn't have a huge number of talking points apart from perhaps Jean-Christophe Perrault and his unfortunate crash in warm-up, which I think, did he crack his collarbone?
Yeah, he broke his collarbone.
Broke his collarbone in warm-up, but started anyway, and didn't finish because he crashed again.
On the same side.
On the same side. Yeah.
On the corner where his family were waiting for him.
On a part of the road which was spray painted with green edge.
Really?
Yes.
So it's an Australian.
Another Australian stuff up.
Oh dear. Anyway, yeah, that did bring tears to the eyes actually on several for several reasons. Just the wincing at the what must have been agony. And an awful end to his tour. He'd been riding very, very well. I think he was 9th overall, so very sad. Yeah, but today, as you say, Lionel, unless we want to talk about the wisdom or otherwise of changing your bike, which was, a decision that Froome made. He changed his bike.
Most of them did, Richard.
Well, everybody did, I think, apart from Saxo, yeah.
So you could say then that the not changing, Contador not changing his bike cost him the stage, couldn't you? Because it seemed to be about, I don't know, 10 to 15 seconds.
Yeah, you could say that. I also saw that somebody had pointed out that Froome changed bikes just before the second time check, which so that second time check was probably not very helpful in indicating exactly where he was at that point. And yeah, he won it by 9 seconds in the end.
Yeah, the changing the bikes was quite interesting, really, because it was quite telling that Froome said it wasn't just about the aerodynamics of having the difference between a low-prof bike for the descent and the flat bits and a more climbing bike for the uphill sections. It was also about having a different selection of gear ratios so that he could really have a very light gear on the climbs and as he described it, a very heavy gear for the flatter rouleur section. So good bit of strategy going on there. And yet Saxo took the option not to do that, presumably because they thought it would be the best option for them. But it's one of those things, it's almost impossible to tell whether Contador or Kreuziger would have been closer or in front of Froome had they adopted the same strategy.
They certainly both rode well. Another little detail that I noticed was that as Chris Froome finished his warm-up and rode to the start, he was riding across the gravel sort of area, or not gravel, but a kind of sandy area between where the buses were parked and where the start was. And I thought it's strange to see him riding on that kind of surface where the tyres can pick up little stones and flints and so on. I noticed he then swapped bikes again before the start, so he had his actual bike waiting for him at the start, so marginal gains, I guess. So yeah, that was interesting. Most of his press conference afterwards was taken up with discussion about tomorrow's stage, the one that goes up Alpe d'Huez twice, that we've all been looking forward to, Tan Man, and in particular the descent, which we've also been talking about an awful lot. Tony Martin and Andy Schleck have been very critical of its inclusion, and Froome has as well, both yesterday and tonight again.
Well, they did it in the Dauphiné, didn't they? But the thing was about the Col de Seren is that when they did it in the Dauphiné, the Alpe d'Huez was the first climb on the menu. Here it is the last, or it's the second last as well as the last. So that's the difference. They'll be racing this descent at breakneck speed as opposed to when they did it in the Dauphiné, which they did at piano pace. So I just want to sort of throw this one out to you about Froome's time trial performance today. I mean, he says every single stage is won. He says he's not trying to make a statement, but by virtue of what he's accomplished, it is a statement of sorts, isn't it? That I'm not just the best climber, I'm the best rider,
period.
I don't know if you can say that that it's a statement in the same way as winning a road stage would be, because you sort of choose to win a road stage, a time trial, you ride as fast as you can, don't you? So you don't try to win it in order to make a statement. I think everybody just rides to their limit.
He did say, though, that he didn't empty the tank completely today, knowing what's coming up in the next 3 days. So to have won it without going, he says, to the deepest of depths, he's probably going to be feeling very satisfied this evening. But like you say about the descent tomorrow, it is becoming a bit disappointing that this debate is going to basically dominate tomorrow's stage. If it rains, and Jean-Francois Péchot, the race director, is adamant that they won't take out the descent and the second climb of Alpe d'Huez, but it's going to dominate tomorrow if it rains. And the worst scenario, even than taking out the climb and the descent, is if the riders take it upon themselves to kind of almost neutralise on the climb, neutralise the descent, and only race the second time up. Because I think the fans on the mountain, who are already on there in huge numbers, would feel a little bit hard done by if that were the case.
I don't think Contador is going to do that, judging by what Bjarne Riis said tonight. This is bike racing, he said, not a grandmother's Sunday outing. Froome should use his brakes more if he is too afraid, because we are going to attack everywhere, whether it's uphill or downhill. So that augurs well. We'll be back in a moment with Owen Slot having joined us.
You're listening to the Tour de France podcast with humansinvent.com and Sharp.
So here we are, thunder is cracking, there are all sorts of other background noises going on. The noise that you heard there at the start of this section, however, was the noise of some Polish people singing for their man Michał Kwiatkowski, whose name we're getting quite good at pronouncing now, the Omega Pharma Quickstep rider. Another good ride by him today, 7th in the time trial. He's 9th overall, excellent for such a young rider. He's only 23, and his main role here has been to help Mark Cavendish. In fact, he gave up his place in the front group on Friday in the crosswinds to Cavendish, and Cavendish, of course, went on and won the stage. I spoke to him afterwards, and he's a great prospect. He's a real all-rounder, brilliant climber, obviously a good time trialist as well, and he's got his little fan club here, which was good to see. You don't see that many Poles at the race, but he saw quite a few on Mont Ventoux, he said. So we're joined by Owen Slot. Owen, hello.
Hello, how fantastic to be back. I'd like to address the followers the way Giro does, but I'm afraid I can't quite do it with the same panache. But just so grateful for you to invite me back after a very long break.
Well, you were with us right at the start, all that time ago in Corsica. It's been a long old time since then, hasn't it? A lot of podcasts under the bridge since then.
Yeah, the followers is up to over 100,000 now. Is that correct?
We've had over 100,000 downloads as of today, which is quite impressive, despite you not being on it since that early podcast. Well, I think it was a preview one.
I just kind of wanted to come back as the publicity agent, so now I've said that piece, I can probably go now. Yeah,
you can go. In this part, we're gonna hear. We've got a couple of interviews tonight, a couple of long interviews. One with the Team Sky doctor Alan Farrell, and one with Jonathan Vaughters, the CEO of Garmin-Sharp, for the third part of the podcast. Both are very interesting, quite long as well. And Taman, I believe that you also had a bit of time today with Tim Kerrison, the Team Sky sort of coach.
I had a time with him, about 2 hours with him on Monday, so on the second rest day press conference. It was actually good to clarify, because there's been so much innuendo cast over Froome and Team Sky in general's achievements since he took the Maillot Jaune on Axe Trois Domaines. So I just wanted some things clarified. The whole conversation was off the record, but it's good for me. At least I can, even if I can't communicate the numbers that he's pushing out, at least I know now that the Froome of this year is not so different to the Froome of last year. The fact is, this is his first Grand Tour where he's gone in with outright leadership. And if you look at the numbers of this year versus last year, there's not much difference. Where he's excelling is in his performance over half an hour. He's very good over that. He's also, this talk has been made of his attacks up Vaughters. The fact is, he and Pete Kenya have been, they train for these specific attacks 3 times a week. So I'm not sure where the other teams are investing in their coaching, but you have to admit that Sky are thinking outside of the square by hiring guys like Kerrison from a swimming and a rowing background, and then this other Australian guy from a triathlon background. So,
and an Australian to boot.
So just perhaps they're investing smarter. I know that they're in the top 3 teams in terms of budget. You know, when the team was conceived in 2010, Brailsford told me that they were ranked 6th to 7th. So they're now moved up to 3rd, and Brailsford is notoriously known for overspending. However, I think they're still spending smartly.
Owen, sorry to sort of just land you, but you've been coming and going a bit from the tour. You've just arrived back. I think you were there. You were there. No, I'm not questioning your commitment at all. I know you've got other.
Here, right.
Yeah, you're here. You're here. But you came back, I think, from Monday's rest day. And Froome, while you've been gone, has obviously become a dominant leader. What have your thoughts been this week about the tour and how it's unfolded and the sort of atmosphere, and particularly compared to last year when Wiggins was the leader?
Well, this year seems it seems that there's the leader obviously has a far greater time gap over his chasers, and it should therefore be more conclusive. Every time that Froome's laid down a big performance here, we in the media, and I think lots of punters have gone away slightly with our chins on the floor thinking, oh, that's it, he's killed it off. And I just kept on thinking back to last year with Wiggins. Almost every day it was like, can he get there, and it was as if the anticipation and the excitement was kept alive to the end. So this year is different in that the time gap's so much different, but because Contador's bringing so much to the party, we keep on seeing more interest in this race, and it's more interesting in that respect. And I find Contador's just been excellent and a great rival, a great villain, if you like, for the British audience. He's the guy that we should be against, but I'm actually supporting him. I want Froome to win, but I love the way that Contador continues to bring this 100th Tour to life.
He's very, very popular. I mean, maybe not with the British audience, but you only have to be at the finish to see the reception he gets. Is probably better than anybody else. Yeah,
but that just doesn't make sense. We've spent a lot of this tour, and you spent a lot of your podcast discussing this whole backdrop of doping. Is Froome clean or isn't he? But the guy who's trying to topple him off his perch here, Contador, is a guy who's actually tested positive and served a sentence. And yet here we are all celebrating his aggression and his panache and doubting Froome, the leader who's never tested positive for anything. That doesn't make sense at all, but it just shows kind of the conflicting emotions of what the Tour does.
The warped world of the Tour de France, I guess. I think what we can hear now from on this kind of topic from the Team Sky doctor, Alan Farrell, an Irishman who started working with the team before the Tour last year. And I had quite a long chat with him today at the time trial start. And here he is. So I'm at the start of the time trial here with the Team Sky doctor, Alan Farrell. Can you just tell me how you became involved with the team?
I have been working with the team for 15 months it is now. They advertised a job in the British Medical Journal then, and I applied for the job just really more in hope than anything, and one thing led to another, and just got the job.
And what's your background?
Background is in general practice with some post-grad experience in sports medicine.
Had you worked in sport before?
I'd worked in amateur sport, but I'd never worked in professional sport before, so this was a leap of faith by the team and me, and obviously it meant big changes in my life, moving from Ireland to, I didn't move to the UK, but obviously changing the way I was working and all those considerations that come along with that. So it was a big move for me, but it was a great, it was a dream move for me.
Are you the only doctor that Team Sky have here? Because I know they've got other doctors on the team.
Yeah, we've got 4 docs on the team. So myself working full-time and 3 other guys working part-time. Yeah,
there was a lot of controversy last year over one of the former Sky doctors, Geert Leinders, who was dispensed with, I suppose, in October, but he was, I think, suspended before the Tour last year. How much did that kind of affect you?
Gert was someone I met once, and because of my not huge knowledge of the history of cycling, I didn't know who Gert was, so it was complete news to me when the revelations came out about his past. And obviously there's an ongoing investigation with regard to that, but I met the guy, and on a personal level he was a very nice individual, and obviously, but there's questions surrounding his involvement with the Rabobank team in the past, and I guess the questions will have to be answered in time.
The doping aspect is huge in cycling, and obviously the suspicion around exceptional performances is huge now, and we've seen that at this tour. How does that affect you, and what is your kind of response to the suspicion there is, and the assumption, let's face it, that some will make that the Team Sky doctor might be involved in something?
One of the ways that the team has tried to approach the sport was by bringing people in from either other sports or from outside sport completely. And I mean, I have no background in professional sport. I have no knowledge of professional cycling prior to Team Sky, and that was one of the ways that we tried to convince people that we're doing things in a very traditional and in a very clean way. Yeah, unfortunately, as is already in the public domain, the team admits that it made a mistake hiring a doctor in the past, and look, with any person who doesn't tell the truth from the beginning, then unfortunately we have to dispense with that individual. So
does it make the job more difficult, more stressful, just to know that there's a suspicion out there? No,
because obviously the tour is different to the rest of all of the other races. There's much more pressure because particularly Chris is doing so well. There's a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of questions being asked, and obviously given the history of the sport and given everything that's happened in the last 12 months, people have the right to ask those questions. So the team has a policy, a no tolerance policy. We try to be as open as possible. We are a clean team. We absolutely adhere to everything surrounding the rules regarding anti-doping, and I mean, for me, for one, I'm so encouraged by the amount of testing that goes on. I'm really convinced by the cultural shift within the sport. It's not just about the testing, it's about everything that goes on peripheral to that. Things like the UCI's no needle policy, things like collaboration with the pharmaceutical industry, things like collaboration with police forces throughout the world. All of those things, the educational policies that various anti-doping organisations run, I do believe, but again, you're never 100% certain. Nobody can ever be 100% certain. The only thing that will prove that the guys that are riding clean will these results stand the test of time, and I believe they will.
Chris was asked yesterday about TUE's therapeutic use exemptions, and he confirmed that he's not riding with any. I'm not going to sort of ask you to break any medical confidences, but TUEs in general, there's been a suspicion that in the past that has been abused. I mean, just at what point would you issue a TUE? Is it something that's quite standard? Is it something that's quite normal practice?
Well, I mean, normal practice in the sense that TUEs exist for a reason. Now, Chris has already said that he doesn't have a current TUE. No rider on this team at the Tour does. No rider on the Team Sky squad has a current TUE. So I'm not breaking any confidentiality.
That's very
there.
interesting.
And I've discussed that with the riders, so it's okay for me to say that. But the thing I think it's important for people to understand what a TUE is. I mean, if you have a rider, an athlete, not a rider, just a rider in cycling, an athlete in a professional sport, and you see, you make an assessment and a diagnosis, and part of your management plan, part of that plan involves the prescribing of medication. Because they're a professional athlete, you have to be sure that medication, if that medication is on what a prohibited list, well then that's what a TUE is. It means that this person is given an exemption to take that medication, and that's, I mean, people have, there's a bit of a train of thought at the moment, if you like, but that TUE is synonymous with cheating. It most certainly is not. They exist for a reason. So if you do, we as physicians working with a team don't grant a TUE. We can only apply for a TUE, and there's certain criteria then that need to be met in order for the various TUE committees on all of the different organisations, in order for them to pass this. So that's That's what they're there. They're there to protect athletes' health so that they can use medication when completely necessary and completely medically justified, but also they have to keep in mind their professional obligations surrounding the...
Just finally, I want to ask about something else, about supplements. We read this week there have been the sprinters in athletics positive cases.
Very interesting.
Very interesting, and
I find it a bit frustrating that the guys here, and I understand that the questions need to be asked, but it's interesting that there's more suspicion surrounding the guys in cycling than there is, not condemnation, but talk about actual real positive tests in another sport.
Yeah, one of the issues that's come out of claim certainly is that Asafa Powell was using 17 supplements, including 2 that were injectable. I know that wouldn't be tolerated, obviously, with the no-needle policy that exists in cycling now.
Yeah.
But what is Team Sky's policy on supplements?
We provide our athletes with our own supplements. And we ensure that there's...
And they're not allowed to use anything additional to that?
No.
How do you check out those supplements? How are you sure?
Our team nutritionist is in charge of that, but all of our supplements would be subject to stringent quality control. But that it's a good point, because that's my nightmare. My nightmare is not about one of these guys testing positive for a performance-enhancing drug that he is willingly used to cheat. It's of a guy taking a supplement, for example, and testing positive as a result of contamination. So that is what keeps me awake at night. So that's why it's important. We have an obligation to these guys as well to provide them with the best support, and part of that support will be providing them with evidence-based supplements, but that they are subject to the strictest control.
What kind of things are those supplements? What kind of things do they provide?
Very, 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 very little. In fact, fish oils, multivitamin. They're very, very. We're not a pro supplement team. If there's evidence for it, we'll consider it. If there's no evidence for it, we'll hammer home the point that we don't use anything that there's no evidence for. There's no place for placebo on this team. So.
This is the humansinvent.com Tour de France podcast, powered by Sharp.
Okay, here we are still doing the humansinvent.com Tour de France podcast with me, Richard Moore, Tan Man, Owen Slot from the Times, and Lionel Burney. That was Alan Farrell, the Team Sky doctor. And actually, one thing he said to me at the end, I thought afterwards of a couple of questions that I neglected to ask him, but he did say to me that he'd be very happy to answer any other questions, and we thought that it would be good to throw it open and ask you if any of you have any questions that you would like put to Alan Farrell, and I can put them to him over the next couple of days, hopefully. If you can tweet at HumansInvent, hashtag Sky Doctor, Ask the Doc, that's good, hashtag Ask the Doc. And any questions at all. There were a couple, as I say, that I thought of asking him, and I intend to return to him and put them to him. Now, we've got a couple of things to get through in this section. We've got the Jonathan Vaughters interview to hear. We ran a competition yesterday to guess third place on the stage today. One person got that right, but checking the times, they seem to post their entry after the time trial was finished, which I didn't feel was in the spirit of the competition.
In cycling, nothing surprises me.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that somebody
Anthony, was that you did that?
Was he he or she the one that got the third place getter right? The one who tweeted
correct.
after.
Correct.
The stage.
Right. They failed a dope test. Although it was Al Chalice, somebody called Al Chalice. Nice ingenuity, but I'm wise to you. But well done for guessing Rodriguez after the event.
It's a tough environment, this podcast, isn't it?
It is. Meanwhile, the person who did, I decided to go for the first person who guessed either second or fourth, and that was Gary Patterson, who voted for Alberto Contador. I actually know Gary Patterson, rather embarrassingly, and there could be that could be slightly dodgy. But then on the other hand, I didn't know. I couldn't sort of advise him on who was going to finish third because I obviously didn't know. So
have you actually been lying about these 100,000 downloads? And it's just Gary every time.
I feel like he is a deserving and worthy winner of the books. How do you guys feel? Anyone got a problem with that?
I've got no problem with that. I don't know Gary. He's welcome to a copy of Hunger, Sean Kelly's autobiography.
I think that Poison Chalice guy should win it.
What guy? Who's Poison Chalice?
Alan Chalice, the guy who...
Oh, Al Chalice.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. Well, we're celebrating... First we're celebrating Contador, now we're celebrating Al Chalice.
Yeah, I mean, this is an event all about controversy, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's hardly novel.
Al Chalice, I think we will send you a book, actually. I think we will.
We'll send him something, yeah.
Okay, get in touch somehow and we'll somehow send you a book.
It's
well,
hardly
we say we will.
Novel, though, to try and guess first, second, or third. Why don't you go for something like who's going to be 42nd or something?
Damn man, we're going to run more competitions. Don't worry. Right, let's crack on with the next feature, which is.
And now, Pedaler de Charme.
Thank you, Chiro, for introducing Pedaler de Charme as you do so brilliantly every night. Guys, any Pedaler de Charme today? We had a nomination. Somebody nominated Kreuziger.
Somebody nominated Kreuziger for looking good on and off the bike.
Or Kreuziger, as he is called by the Australians and by Chris Froome.
Yeah.
Even though there's no N in his name.
No. Well, there is in Roman, but,
That doesn't carry into Kreuziger, I don't think. Kreuziger, then, fourth on the stage, very stylish rider, absolutely a worthy nominee. Any other nominations for Pedaler de Charme, or it can be Pedaler sans charme if it's somebody who's... I mean, Perrault would be perhaps a cruel nomination.
You guys were sort of waxing lyrical over Kwiatkowski, but the thing is that... Really, you should give... I think a lot of credit should go to Quintana. I mean, this guy's an exquisite climber in the mountains. He can also produce a fantastic individual time trial, and he's going to win, or most likely, based on the parcours for the next 3 days, he's going to win the white jersey competition by a country mile. I mean, it's a great time trial by Quintana, given what he's done in the mountains on the previous stages.
Yeah, it's not... I mean, it's quite close between him and Kwiatkowski, actually. It's only a few minutes, It would only... Quintana's looked very good, and you imagine he'll be consistent, but a collapse one day would see Kwiatkowski maybe move into that white jersey. We don't know. I'm just very impressed by him, and he's also a very stylish rider. Owen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, that's because I want to be involved.
Sorry.
Okay, so I have a good nomination for Cadell Evans.
What?
I know, unlikely, so that makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
A beautiful stylist on the bike, not particularly, but he came, for a man not known for his charisma, he came in with a top quote today. He reported when he got to the finish that as he'd been riding on the time trial today, someone who was presumably an Aussie yelled out at him, "Don't worry about the ashes, just concentrate on the climb."
What's the ashes?
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on a different podcast. I'll go and do that one in a minute.
Excellent. Some great nominations there. Kwiatkowski as well, again. I know I'm mentioning him a lot, but he was very patient with his Polish fans and posed for lots of pictures and everything. So that was nice to see. So, again, deserving. So I think I get the deciding vote, so I'll give it to him. Now, any other business chaps? Any other pressing issues, burning issues that you really want to bring up as we prepare to go into our Jonathan Vaughters interview?
Perhaps just to refute some of that innuendos that continues to be cast over Froome. I mean, the fact is, if you want to throw question marks over Froome, then you need to throw question marks over, say, the performances of Belkin. Now, it's a little hard to compare last year versus this year because you've got guys who like Contador, Rodriguez, Kreuziger, and Valverde, who didn't ride last year's Tour de France. But the ones who did, for example, Lawrence Tendam, until the start of today, he was lying 6th overall. Now, he finished an hour and 2 minutes behind last year. So you could say...
last year he fell on his face? Was that last year? Or was that 2 years ago?
No, that was the year before. So, I mean, this whole thing is a vicious circle, and that's why, unless you have conclusive proof, hand it over to us and we'll report it. But if you don't, then you should probably just shut up.
Very, very good point, and one that Jonathan Vaughters kind of makes in the interview we're going to hear. He says we're in danger of entering a McCarthyism type era in cycling because by casting doubt over whoever is in the leading positions in the Tour based on picking isolated performances. And he says that there's not been any broad scientific study yet. He says that you can you can pick up trends if you look at the top 20, 30 in the Tour de France, but you can't take one rider's performance and even compare it from one year to the next or one day to the next as indication of very much at the moment. And he was just warning against the dangers of kind of casting that suspicion and doubt over absolutely everybody as soon as they put on any good performance in the race. But I started by asking him how his conversation went with our competition winner yesterday, who won a phone call from Jonathan Vaughters. So that's how we started.
No, great. He was, knowledgeable, enthusiastic cycling fan. I guess he works at the oldest bike shop in the world. I didn't. That was kind of interesting for me. Nice guy. Had relevant questions. Certainly curious about all the different aspects of the racing and all the different controversies. I'd be happy to do it again.
So you've been back on the tour a couple of days, I gather. From your point of view, how would you assess the race so far?
It's certainly been a hard grinding race, and I think it's only going to get harder and more grinding as we go into the next couple of days. I think the racing's been interesting. Obviously Chris Froome, has been dominant, but his team has not, and the other teams have been able to sort of take advantage of that from time to time, ourselves included. We'll see, if it continues to be aggressive these last few days, and if we can continue to be aggressive these last few days.
One of the themes of this tour does appear to be teamwork, and I know that's something that your team have kind of embraced, that holistic approach to racing, having a kind of a team goal, sometimes supporting a particular individual for an overall or for a particular stage win. But do you think we're witnessing a kind of gradual evolution in the way the tour is being raced? Because some teams that we perhaps wouldn't expect to have worked so well as a unit have shown some really impressive teamwork in this race.
We've seen in the last 5 years that cycling has become, increasingly competitive. If you look at, 5 years ago, we were probably the only team that was really pushing the barriers on aerodynamics and nutrition and a lot of other these fronts. Now, I can't even say that, we're the best at that anymore. Sky's sort of been able to expend more resources in those areas than we have, and even little teams, like Lampre and Euskaltel have great equipment, and so the margins are much, much smaller than they used to be, and the advantages to be had from, technological games and nutritional games are smaller, and teamwork goes right into that, in that I think 5-6 years ago, of course the teams were there, but it had a more individual feel to it, but as the sport has progressed, the competitiveness and the raised bar from the competitiveness has forced teams that maybe had a more individual attitude before to be more focused on teamwork, and because it's the only way to be competitive anymore.
We talked to Charlie about the stage when your team pulled off in the Pyrenees, where you took a real risk, possibly could have put David Miller, Jack Bauer outside the time limit if things had panned out a different way, just to try and set things up so that Dan Martin would have the opportunity to win the stage. And Charlie said to us that having a boss who is prepared to take a significant risk by that in order to try to win, knowing that it might not pay off, gives him a real freedom when he's trying to give the team briefing and give direction from the car. But I mean, what would have been the repercussions if it hadn't paid off and you'd lost a couple of guys? I mean, would you have been on the phone offering commiserations, or? Yeah,
of course, it would be. It wouldn't be positive, but that's the whole point of a risk. When you take a calculated risk, there is always a downside, and you can't shy away from that downside if you want to win. It's simple to place in the middle of the pack in a bike race without taking any risks, and it keeps everyone content. It doesn't make them happy, but it keeps everyone content. But if you want to win, you're going to have to make some people angry. You're going to have to upset the balance a little bit. You're going to have to risk some people being very angry. That's just part of it. And at the end of the day, what is it? Theodore Roosevelt always said the buck stops here. So that's my responsibility. I feel like if I authorize Charlie to take that aggressive an approach, and I authorize the riders to ride that aggressive a race, I know that if it goes wrong, that it'll come back to me. That I can't blame the riders. I can't blame Charlie for the execution. The strategy comes from me, and so I have to say, all right, well, if it goes wrong, then you guys are all free to point the finger at me.
Now, this is the first Tour de France since USADA's reasoned decision, so I suppose it was inevitable that the spotlight would fall on perhaps whoever was wearing the yellow jersey. Do you think it's unfortunate, the place that cycling finds itself in now, with regard to Chris Froome being such a dominant wearer of the yellow jersey so far, and some of the questions that he's had to field over the last week or so?
Well, listen, I mean, the reason the skepticism is there is founded, not regarding Chris Froome, but regarding, the 100-year history of the sport and what it's been through. So you can't be upset with the people asking the hard questions, and that's very clear to me. But I do feel that we have to be careful at this point in time in cycling that we don't drift too far away from fairness and the enforcement of the rules in a clear way, and that we drift into McCarthyism. And I think there's a very big risk of that. And it's up to the fans, it's up to the media, it's up to the teams, it's up to the riders to really stop and think about everything a little bit and say, okay, we want this to be fair, and we need that to happen, and we need the rules to be enforced. But we can't go to the point of, like a McCarthyistic era where, people are being hung, or a French Revolution. Think of the bloodshed in the French Revolution. I mean, when you have a chaotic point in time in history where things have been seen to be unfair for years and years, the backlash for that is very heavy. And I don't want to see, unneeded loss of reputation, unneeded bloodshed, just for the sake of fairness, which by overcorrecting will, in essence, become unfair.
In terms of what Dave Brailsford was talking about having power data being gathered and assessed by people who can actually read and understand it. I mean, you have at times released data, and you run the risk of it being interpreted correctly or incorrectly, and
it's been both.
And of course, usually the interpretation by the loudest talker is the one that kind of gets listened to initially. So can you understand why Sir Dave Brailsford is reluctant to release their data? And do you think that this is a workable idea that he suggested about having a body that spots trends that may be suspicious to also target testing?
Of course, and that's a long-term project that we certainly should look at. But the fact of the matter is that here now today, while there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that can say, well, this type of doping leads to this type of power increase and so on and so forth, there's never been a broad population double-blind study done on this. So, when people say, well, I'm an expert and X, Y, and Z is suspicious and A, B, and C is not, the fact of the matter is that the true, objective scientific studies on this do not exist yet. Like I said, a lot of people have anecdotal evidence. My personal SRM files, I have some that are doped and some that are not doped, and I can certainly point to those, but that's unique to my physiology, that's unique to the conditions of that day, of that week, of that month. It's not a broad enough perspective to just draw definitive conclusions. So, that's probably a long-term effort that needs to be made, without a doubt, and I think that it's valid to pursue that. I don't think that, scientifically and statistically, it's invalid to single out performances at this stage and say, well, that can't be because, the information isn't there. Now, is it statistically significant if you look at the top 20 or 30 in the Tour de France and say the climbing speeds have gotten faster as we went into the late 90s and then they got slower now? Yes, but that's the top 20 or 30 people. When you start individualizing that, I mean, any statistician will tell you that doesn't work. Not yet, anyway. We can get to the point where that will work, but that requires a few years of research.
The Tour de France with humansinvent.com. Innovation, craftsmanship and design.
So that was Jonathan Vaughters there, some very interesting stuff, including at the end there his comments about Lance Armstrong. Actually, we've only talked about Lance Armstrong once, and that was when Owen was on our last podcast, the one before the Tour.
Yeah, but I only come back for Lance podcasts. It's kind of a specialist subject of mine, yeah.
But it's an interesting topic, isn't it? I mean, very contentious. I mean, Vaughters has been in contact with Lance. Some other people have too. I heard a rumour yesterday that Lance was offered a column in a French newspaper during this tour, which he declined. I think that would have been divisive, to say the least, especially as the newspaper in question publishes the work of one Antoine Weyer. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. But what are your thoughts, Owen, about this idea that there could be some way back for Lance? I mean, the whole idea of redemption, which is central to Vaughters and his team, should that apply to everybody, including Armstrong?
I guess if you're ethically pure on that particular argument, then it should do. I think it would be horrendous for this event if he did come back, because it would be such a sideshow. But if maybe he came back for maybe Vacances Soleil as a soigneur or something, that we'd love to see that.
Brilliant mechanic. Clean that car.
I actually noticed today Froome, after he warmed down, after winning the time trial, he had no one to clean himself up, other than himself. So there's a position.
There's a vacancy there.
There's a vacancy.
To clean Froome dogs.
Yeah.
to bath the Froome dogs.
7 successive years cleaning the yellow jersey's face every day on the tour, and I think Lance.
This is a great idea. Some kind of form of penance. Lance, you can come back if what could he do? I mean, he couldn't do the Bernardino roll on the podium. That would be too prestigious. Perhaps he could maybe be security at the press centre or something. One of these guys in the green outfits who checks our press credentials when we come in.
He could participate in this podcast, in fact.
I'm not sure if I agree with that sort of redemption. I'm not sure.
Joking aside, though, his shadow is here on the race, isn't it? The whole reason that Froome's had the questions thrown at him is because people think that his performances are in some way Armstrong-esque, and you look at the L'Equipe front page on Monday, Froome naturellement,
Gazzetta as well, which we need to haul our friend Chiro over the coast. I mean, there was an outrageous front page on Gazzetta. I think it was Tuesday. It was equating Froome and Tyson Gay, the sprinter, and saying the black day for athletics, suspicion at the tour. Which was clever.
Yeah.
Would the Times carry a front page like that, Owen?
Well, it depends. With Kate Middleton almost about to give birth, I don't think there's a chance.
Maybe the royal baby could be called Chris.
That'd be nice.
Works if it's a boy or a girl.
Or Lance.
Froome dog.
That'd be nice.
Froome dog Windsor.
I don't want Lance back at the tour. I really don't think he's got much to offer. I don't think he can offer anything that's not already out there on the table. So, just getting back to, I'll quote both Vaughters and Kerrison, because Vaughters said you have to remember that these athletes are already at the edge of physical performance. So you can't really compare. When we're talking about comparisons, you can't compare, say, a normal, very fit person even with a top-level athlete, and especially one who races the Tour de France. Then Kerrison said that these people like Froome and Contador, he referred to them as outliers. They're just so on that periphery of
they don't
athletic.
Fit into any
they don't fit into a hole that people want to put them into. So that's another thing to consider.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we are reluctant to believe that one person could be so. And we've talked about this a lot, a danger of repeating ourselves. But in other fields, in music, in acting and writing, there are clearly outliers. There are clearly greats who are beyond the sort of comprehension almost of normal people, what they are able to do. Charles Dickens, to name one example. I mean, it sounds a ridiculous example, but human beings are sometimes capable of exceptional achievements.
I just think if the audience or the viewers are just so cynical, I think it's good to have a healthy degree of skepticism, but if you're so cynical that you just don't believe anything, then stop watching.
And on that note, I think that's a great way to end our podcast.
Or stop listening.
Or stop listening,
No,
yeah.
don't do that.
No. Still lots to talk about. Well, listen, thank you, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Tan Man.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you, Owen.
That's great to be back.